Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. French President Emmanuel Macron has landed in Jaipur a day before attending the Republic Day celebrations in Delhi as the chief guest. His visit marks the 25th anniversary celebrations of the India-French strategic partnership. France has stood as India's closest friend even when other Western countries like the US and Canada more recently have tried to peddle the Nijjar and Pannu narrative against India. Remember, only last year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited France as the chief guest on Bastille Day. He had urged the Indian and French business leaders to work for advancing the friendship between the two sides. Now, Emmanuel Macron's visit comes at a crucial juncture when India is emerging as a Vishwamitra or friend of the world, as reiterated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi last month while hosting the UAE President for the vibrant Gujarat Summit too. But a friend that, quite like France, has its own strategic vision and independent stance. But there is also a deeper symbolism. Macron is the face of French liberalism and secularism, a touchstone for most other democracies. Ahead of 2024 general elections, attacks on Narendra Modi on these subjects have increased, particularly after the Ram Mandir Pran Pratishtha moment. But PM Modi is also batting on the front foot. He is really the face of an Indian form of liberalism and secularism. As he showcases India's growing might globally with a roadshow shortly with Macron, he also hammered his guarantees earlier today in a rally in UP on a day his campaign song was launched. So does he have a guarantee of a 2024 comeback? We'll take that question to our guests in just a bit. But I want to re-emphasize the meaning and the message out of Macron's visit to India. There are multiple facets and there are messages not just for Indians but for the global community at large. Now, Macron had accepted a very late invite that was given to him. This shows that he is truly a friend in need with no conditions that other countries might put. He comes from France, the land of staunch secularism. He is the face of action against extremism by minorities, exclusivism by Muslims in France. And India, he is supporting India amidst criticism on Indian secularism under Narendra Modi. Remember, France is also the most liberal of all democracies and is backing India, which is accused of democratic backsliding again under Narendra Modi. France is a voice of strategic independence. It doesn't always take the same stance as other Western countries, and it coincides with India's vision of a multipolar world. This is where both sides are very alike. France is siding with India while countries like US and Canada are trying to pressurize India into some sort of submission, particularly on the issue of Khalistani elements and the kind of nuisance they are peddling against India. Now, Macron's visit is also in line with the Prime Minister's focus on re-establishing India's prowess on the global stage. This has been a major thrust during his second term, something the BJP and the Prime Minister don't lose any opportunity to highlight. Now remember, India recently pulled out all stops to host a very successful G20 summit. And during this summit, it played a key leadership role to take it from G20 to G21. It also displayed power play at the recent vibrant Gujarat Summit. Who can forget the bonhomie between the UAE President showcased at this summit, where there was a roadshow between the two leaders and the UAE President also made a rare speech. And recently, India has also stood with the world during the COVID pandemic, which has earned it a lot of respect, along with the fact that the most populous country in the world, which is India, handled the COVID pandemic much better than many in the developed world. And all of these are successes that the Prime Minister continues to hammer on. Let's not forget, everything the PM does ties into his vision for the country and thus also ties into his vision as far as his pitch to the public is concerned. It's going to take more importance in an election year like this one. Just today, the BJP released its 2024 campaign video, which showcased the PM's successes. Diplomatic relations feature here too. But let me break down what all does this video highlight. So it highlights jobs created via startups. It highlights the G20, the Chandrayaan success, which is really taking India a notch above in respect, if nothing else. Crackdown on black money. Now, this is something his opponents could criticize the BJP government's track record on. Internationalizing the Yoga Day. It was done well early into his first term, but it is still featuring very prominently as far as this new campaign video is concerned. Then, of course, is the third largest economy goal. This is something the PM reiterates every speech. The fact that it's a key player at COP28 summit. The inauguration of the Ayodhya Ram Mandir featured in it, but also featured in it strong relations with the Middle East. For example, I mentioned the recent visit by the UAE president as well. But with Macron in India, the question we ask is this. The Prime Minister is once again showcasing Bharat's might. Is that a guarantee of a 2024 comeback? We'll take that to our guests in just a bit.
जल्द से जल्द देश के हर नागरिक को उसके लिए बनी सरकारी योजना का लाभ मिले। आज देश मोदी की गारंटी को गारंटी पूरा होने की गारंटी मांगता है।
Let's go across to our guest. Joining us, Charu Pragya is from the BJP. Pinakaranjan Chakravarti is former secretary, MEA. Kapil Madan, lawyer and political analyst, leans towards the Congress party. Ghanshyam Tiwari, spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party. And Pathikrit Payan is strategic affairs expert joining us on the show. Before I go to our experts, let me just bring in some political elements as well. Ghanshyam Tiwari, why don't I begin with you? You know, here is a lot of the Western agencies, talking about India in a negative light, that secularism is in danger, minorities are in danger, liberalism is dead in India. And here you have the most liberal, the most secular country's president coming to India and being the face of its Republic Day celebrations. This is a stamp of the fact that all criticism that comes from the West or that Western prism need not be bought.
Good evening, Shivani, to you, the viewers and fellow co-panelists. There are two different things. One is how the world looks at India is a story which has been built over 70 years. It is built on the thought leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, the government, subsequent governments, the past glory of India, as well as what the current government does. The power of Indian constitution and power of Indian institutions. As far as the stifling of voices in India, the fracture of democracy in India, you don't have to go to Paris to watch it. You have to go to the parliament and see when 140 members of parliament are thrown out, when the press is gagged, when laws are passed without any discussion, when the government and the party in government wants to make breaking communal harmony as their prime agenda. There are multiple ways to look at it, and everyday newspapers will tell you the story. As far as the visit of the French president is concerned, it is a continuation of strong friendly ties that France and India has, and the strategic interest that these two countries have together, both at multilateral forums such as the United Nations Security Council, the overall interest vis-a-vis the global geopolitics. And you are right that France has been able to take an independent view of Indian foreign policy stances, and also Macron has been able to...
But this is where I tie the two together. Ghanshyam, just to take your point forward, this is where I tie the two together. Here's a country that believes in its values. The French values are quoted everywhere else in the world. But here's a country, and Macron is the face of speaking against Muslim extremism, of stamping down against exclusivism in the name of religion. He doesn't allow that in France. It's the most secular of all countries. And it's not a country that follows the quote-unquote Western line on India, which is peddled repeatedly as some sort of a counterbalance or check against India. Possibly it's time for Indians too to shed that baggage.
Well, we don't have to go to France to understand how diversity works. India is a living example that it is the European Union that is learning from India that how diversity works.
Sure.
But in the rule of BJP, we are giving away that thought leadership that is obvious in everyday conduct in society by this government. So we don't have to get their certificate. As far as the French problem with extremism is concerned, that is their own problem that doesn't have any Indian dimension to it. In India, the diversity is not a problem. Many parts in Europe, diversity is seen as a problem and they are trying to grapple with that problem. In India, it is our strength. That is the fundamental difference.
Yes, it is our strength, which is why some of the criticisms that come, particularly in election years, is that motivated? Is a question I'll come back to, but I'll allow Charu Pragya to respond to Ghanshyam Tiwari that, foreign dignitaries do not necessarily provide a stamp of approval that sometimes the BJP or Narendra Modi might want to project.
Shivani, good evening. Nobody is looking for a stamp of approval, but we have to remember at the end of the day, the world is one village, and one thing that impacts one country will eventually impact another. India and France have a lot of shared values, the first and the strongest of them being a zero tolerance policy towards terror. I think that's one thread which ties us very strongly. And whatever you say about diversity, the problem in France is not diversity. The problem remains to be terrorism. And whichever section of society is supporting that terrorism, it is our job to take a stand against that. See, it's not about approval from any foreign country, but it's about claiming the space and being proud of the space that India now occupies on the global stage. Now, whether it is India as a country which is exporting vaccines to 150 plus nations, whether it is India as the country which for the first time got complete consensus during the G20, which included the whole African Union into the G20, that inclusivity goes a really long way. What we are trying to say here is that, and don't worry, I have nothing to say about the opposition. I have no time to look at your grass because BJP is too busy watering our side of the fence, and that's what we focused on the last 10 years. We've made sure that every single where you can measure development in India, we have delivered. Every single place. आप simple चीजों से शुरुआत करते हैं, घर, पानी, बिजली, we've made sure of that. आप उसके एक कदम आगे बढ़ते हैं, आप शिक्षा की बात करते हैं, medical care की बात करते हैं, we are taking care of that. Whether it is Jan Aushadhi Kendra or Ayushman card, we talk about dharma. We've made sure religious places of tourism are touching new heights. The recent one, Hamare Ramji has also come back home. So we are delivering every day, and it was not just Ramji that day. Modi ji announced solar panels for 1 crore households in India.
Okay. So you're saying everything is going together as far as development is concerned. I want to shift to our experts very quickly. Before I come back to how the politics is associated with a lot of what is going on, these are some live visuals also coming in. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron now taking a tour of some of the sites as far as Jaipur is concerned. Going across to Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, former secretary of the MEA as well, there's that famous hug as well. There were cutouts of the Macron-Modi hug that were put on roads in Jaipur as well. Huge camaraderie between the two and mutual trust. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, what is the message you read from Macron's very late invite, acceptance and the faith he has shown in India?
Well, I think Indo-French relations have become, what shall I say, across the template, sort of a model, a kind of a growing model of two countries, both liberal democracies, both secular and both reaching out to each other without, the irritants that we have with the Anglosphere, as we call them, the English-speaking countries. So I think we must distance ourselves from all this, noise. I call it noise in the, don't say Western media, please always say Anglosphere media, because although other media also criticizes, the French TV, for example, does criticize, but that's okay. We can live with that. We have a free media. We can criticize each other and anybody else. But I think we should not get so, worked up by this whole, Anglosphere media criticism. I really don't think that is important for us. I think it is far more important for us to concentrate on building ties with our friendly countries like a strategic partner like France, because we've had a long-term, France was a colonial power in India, and it left its mark on certain places. It's a different matter that they lost out to the British, and if they had won, I would be talking to you in French, perhaps. But I think, France did leave its mark.
Yes.
We learned a lot from them. Of course, after the French Revolution, their ideas spread across the world and into India as well. So I think, and France and India both value what we call in foreign policy strategic autonomy. That we are not going to be camp followers of anybody. We will take our own decisions, and France is that way. There's a huge degree of convergence with France.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
They've also been. Yes.
So just to last sentence. So we have a very good relationship with France, which is based on this convergence and based on mutual interest. So I think, and the very fact that France, your first question, that France, the Macron, accepted the invitation when it was known that Biden
had refused it. Yes,
and finally had refused. So I think it shows that how much empathy he has for India and as for a personal chemistry with the Prime Minister.
Absolutely. There is certainly an element in this visit, Pathikrip, which is a response that even India would like to send to countries like US and Canada, given the latest rows. But do you feel the timing of the French president's visit coming days after the Ram Temple moment, which is being, I would say, largely being projected very negatively with a certain connotation and with certain colored eyes around the world. Do you feel the timing is also important given what the French president represents?
Shivani, let me tell you a few things about France. Number one, the French people are fiercely protective of their own culture, the kind of cultural renaissance that we see in India today happening. Number two, the French people are fiercely nationalistic. And when what they actually apply is hard secularism, which means in 2010, they imposed a complete ban on all kind of veil on the face. I don't know how many of my secular friends would agree to the kind of secularism which France applies. If India were to apply those things, I mean, they would call them communal. So let me tell you, there are a lot of areas of convergence between France and India. Number one, I think on many occasions, France actually felt shortchanged by the West. The recent thing, you can talk about the deal with Australia for submarines, which was to go to France, and eventually it went to America and United Kingdom. And it was a huge deal consisting of probably $30-40 billion. On several occasions, in several areas, France considers itself as an outlier. They don't agree to everything that the Americans do. Sometimes they are compelled to actually follow the line, but they don't actually agree. So I think in many ways, India is following the template that France has created in terms of having technological independence that gives them the freedom or the elbow room for having a foreign policy which is independent. So far as what's happening in India is concerned, I keep on saying this. They have their own intelligence agencies and embassies to inform how India is working. They don't need to read newspapers separately to find out. So I think whether you talk about President Macron...
Are you saying the French don't use this as a stick to beat India with, while other Western countries do? This whole canard of secularism and liberalism and backsliding of democracy, the French just don't use it against India. Certainly the French don't make any statements against India publicly ever.
Well, recently I actually worked on a report on something very similar. Let me tell you, the French newspapers are equally critical of the French government.
Sure,
it's a complete leftist. It's a leftist media. So beyond the point, nobody gives too much importance to what they say. Even the French government doesn't give importance. But the reality is, beyond the camaraderie, there's a lot of realism in it. First and foremost, there are major defense deals which are coming up, and at every occasion, I think the French considers that anything which doesn't go to the Americans, they find an opportunity, and that's a great thing. The biggest thing is, the area of convergence, which you can say has happened over several years and decades, is that the French have never put any kind of caveat when they sell a technology.
Yes.
That's the kind of faith they have on India, and it is across governments. I'm not saying only in this government. But let me also tell one thing. I stated it in your previous program also when the President of UAE visited India, had there been an iota of doubt in the mind of the French President about the election in 2024 in India, he perhaps would have delayed this, visit, because that is something that's very important for them when it comes to deals like this. There can be some announcements tomorrow, whether it's for the 26th Rafale for the area aircraft carrier, or 3 more submarines of Kalvari class, which is basically the Scorpion, the naval group makes it of France. So I think whether it's on areas of nuclear technology or areas of, whether it's defense and many other areas, I think they believe that Prime Minister Modi is taking the right step in terms of what. In 2013, let me tell you, Shivani, India was among the fragile 5 economies of the world. By 2023, it became among the major 5 economies of the world. So the transformation that has happened against all odds gives them the confidence that this is a country which they can bank upon, primarily because of its economic stability and an independent foreign policy.
Yes, but I think at the same time, Patikrit, the French don't want, quote unquote, a certain kind of India. They don't drive that message. At least, India has risen economically only just yet. But there is no history of the French trying to, insist that there should be a certain element to India. For example, religious freedom. Now, the US has been infamous, and their agencies have been infamous for hammering India on this, when we all know the kind of work US funded missionaries do in India and the kind of reaction they get. But I don't want to step into that just yet. I want to go across to Kapil Madan as well. Kapil, the fact that he has managed to elevate India's position in global relationships and diplomatic ties is a cornerstone of the Prime Minister's stint in office, particularly his second stint. Don't you think that this is one thing that separates him quite a bit from his predecessors, particularly the UPA era?
Well, I think, the recent turn of events, if you, look at it, dispassionately, you'll get to know we had a, strained relationship with Canada. We had a situation where the Prime Minister, the President of the United States, after conclusion of G20, he went to Vietnam and he raised the issue of press freedom and the state of affairs in India. To say that, and he want to give credit to, Mr. Modi just because a president of a country visits here. So I will also remind you that, President of France has visited earlier for the Republic Day celebration back in 2004. President of South Africa has graced the occasion in 2005. President of Brazil has graced the occasion in 2006. Vladimir Putin, President of Russia, has graced the occasion in 2007. Again, President of France has graced the occasion of 2008. Now, the fact of the matter is that we see that, on a Republic Day celebration, we have people, we have guest dignitaries from different countries, and to read too much into
no, not just this visit. I'm saying that during his second term as the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi has particularly focused on India's heft in the world diplomatically, in being a change leader, in being a country that can drive change through its own values without aping Anglosphere or Western values. Kapil, don't you think that is something that separates him? And I'll go back to Ghanshyam and Charu after that.
No, I will just take. Let's take our viewers to a very recent turn of events. What we saw in Maldives. I mean, Maldives. This is a clear example of goal. I mean, it was absolutely not required. Soon after that incident, you have a country where our soldiers were there, strategically, they were there. They have issued a mandate and have asked us to remove our soldiers. And there are now reports that, Chinese soldiers are going there. So what kind of,
No, Maldives is a conundrum. No questions on that. But that's because of a change of government, not so much because India has changed. They've had an opposition party come to power on the basis of an India out campaign.
Shivani, I think if you need an example, a picture of self-goal, so I think, the incident, the way we have...
Maldives was an incident. Okay. All right. I take your point. Ghanshyam Tiwari. Ghanshyam, you wanted to come in.
Well, first and foremost, we have to look at the visit as a continuation.
Sure.
Macron is the 6th French leader who has been accorded the honor of India's chief guest Republic Day celebration, and 4th since 1998. France has also exported the most weapons to India between 2017 and 2021, apart from Russia. So there is clear business ties, defense ties, and a continuation of relationship. to use that and to whitewash the blot that BJP has with respect to the constitutional democracy that India is, with respect to social harmony in India, with respect to progress, with respect to federalism, with respect to press freedom, with respect to women rights, with respect to so many other things, where Prime Minister himself has failed, and his guarantee is a guarantee of failure rather than success, whether it is jobs, whether it is black money. I will not use the French visit as a way to whitewash.
But what about his overall success on the global stage? Hasn't India's heft, India's position, India's respect increased in the last 10 years?
Well, you look at, you start the global stage from where India is. India's equation with Pakistan, India equation with China.
India's equation with Pakistan is much better than it used to be, Ghanshyam, don't you think?
Well, no, absolutely not. And the Prime Minister visited out of turn, he visited Nawaz Sharif. What happened after that?
Yeah, but that was 9 years ago.
Yes, and what happened in those 9 years? What happened with China? Prime Minister
I think we've shown Pakistan its place. You don't agree?
You are contradicting. Is it better, or we have shown them their place?
Can relations with Pakistan be better? I think we've come to a realization it's better to just minimize the Pakistan effect on India. We used to be so cowed down with the Pakistan factor.
I don't think so. We defeated Pakistan, but that aside, I'm saying whether it is Pakistan, whether it is China, whether it is Bhutan, whether it is Maldives, you must start somewhere. You start with Indian neighbors and look at how Indian relationship has changed during the
I want to take that to Charu.
Just visiting the world doesn't mean that you will have an effective.
I want to take that to Charu. You can talk about US, France, UK, Australia, the world. What about the Indian neighborhood?
I'll tell you why I disagree, Shivani. The difference between India then and India now is that this India stands up for itself. This India does not mince its words. We say what we mean. My friend was talking about Canada. Why are the relations strained? Because we are taking a stand for what is right for our country. And that brings us respect. See, we are not looking for temporary pats on our back from any country, neighboring or otherwise. What we are looking for is what is good for our country. We follow a policy of India first, and that is going to take our country a long way ahead. We are not looking at India 5 years later or 10 years later. We are looking at India even 50 years later, and that I think is the difference between all the Prime Ministers before Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Modi today. It's important we remember that. See, even when it came to buying oil, our External Affairs Minister gave a strong statement. We are not calming down now, please. And if you think that Pakistan is a major factor, let me tell you today, we have decided we don't want to have talks with anyone who's sending terrorism across the border towards our country. We take a strong stand and we'll stick to that.
No, I think I will also stick to the point that while we'll all love to have great relationships with our neighbors, but with a neighbor like Pakistan, it's better that we minimize its impact than be forever mired in trying to please a country whose entire identity is anti-India.
That was also appeasement of a kind, right?
Yeah, Shivani? It was appeasement of a kind. Absolutely, absolutely. Today, Pakistan has no bearing on anything that happens in India. It is stuck in a quagmire of its own. We don't wish ill will to anybody, but certainly Pakistan is not a country that has earned much goodwill in India either, and those days are gone. We have turned a leaf. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, you agree? What would you rate Narendra Modi's foreign policy as? What has been the standout feature and where have we lacked?
Well, one area, I mean, just to pick off the menu, is our policy towards, let's say, West Asia or the Middle East, as the West calls it. I mean, we've managed to develop good relations with most of the countries, although they are fighting amongst each other. But we maintain good lines of communication with them, and and our trade has gone up, our people working there has gone up, and we have also benefited from certain countries on defense technologies and things like that. So I think that is one area. Look, in geopolitics and in foreign relations, there is no a steady state solution. In physics, we call it a steady state. But the universe, for example, is in a steady state. There are ups and downs. Look what happening in the Maldives. Suddenly, one new politician campaigns on a particular thing and wins the election, and now is showing that he wants to bring his country. He, or I suppose not the whole country, but he wants to get closer to China,
Yes.
which is keen on finding a foothold there. So these things happen. There's nothing, there's nothing fixed, in geopolitics, and so everybody does that. Most countries do that to seek leverage. For example, the so-called Anglosphere media keeps writing all the stories that they want to write. But I think these are all, an element of leverage that they
Leverage,
seek.
yes.
Apart from the fact that they think they are very liberal and independent, although I know from my inside knowledge that they also toe the line when told. So, by their own governments. So I think these things happen. One should not get too upset about it.
Yeah.
Domestic politics is a different matter, and I don't want to get into that because I'm not, partisan in that sense. But I think in geopolitics and foreign policy, one has to be, careful about, things go up and down a bit, things deteriorate, things improve sometimes, etc. So I think whatever the policies that this government has followed, there are successes, and we could have done better. We can always say that for any occasion. But overall, if you ask me,
Yes.
India's footprint, India's profile has grown in the world much more than what I have seen in the past. So I think
No, that was exactly the point. How much is India's word being valued? Is that more than it used to be? Has the trajectory been much better than what we used to climb on? Has the graph shot up sharply, or has it been just a steady increase? And I think it's not. It would be foolhardy to not accept that a lot of that heft comes from economic might too, which is why the Prime Minister's focus, if you look at in all of his election rallies and now his election campaign that is kicking off, is about India as an Atmanirbhar Bharat plus a $5 trillion economy plus a top 3 major economy of the world. So that goes with you being powerful. I think that pragmatism has set in. Working off a poor India, needy India image is not what India is doing anymore. Pathikrit, what do you feel? Has Narendra Modi been able to increase India's heft more than other prime ministers have in the past?
Shivani, if India had not done anything in the last 10 years, IMF chief would not have come up and say that India stands as a bright spot in an otherwise dark horizon. And this is just after the COVID situation when India emerged as the 5th largest economy of the world. So if India had not done anything specifically under Prime Minister Modi's regime, India would not have emerged as the voice of the global south that it is today. If India had not defied the Western sanctions and had taken oil from Russia, we would have been under deep recession, which many of the other countries are right now in. If India had not taken an independent stand when it comes to Middle East, where it stated that we are in favor of the two-state policy, but we're completely against terrorism, things wouldn't have the way it is that both the sides are in support of us. Let me tell you two things, Shivani. A lot of people talk about press freedom. European Union itself banned Sputnik and Russia Today channel the moment the war between Ukraine and Russia started, because they never wanted the Russian version to be told to the Europeans. Secondly, Russia Today channel is not available on YouTube. CGTN was banned by the British government because it had a Communist Party stake in it. So what freedom of expression and speech the West says? I mean, they don't have the modus operandi or the locus standi to talk on these issues. So far as India is concerned, to emerge as the 5th largest economy of the world after giving 200 crore vaccines free, after having taken care of 80 crore plus people, after doing enormous amount of work in terms of making sure that you eventually develop resilient supply chains so that your dependence on China comes down, it is enormous. And against a lot of foreign pressure, let me tell you, many countries in the West are reluctant to allow India to break the status quo, and that's why you would find noise happening. The difference, as you initially asked me, France have never used its NGOs and news channels to create
keep India in check.
For its allies, which some other countries unfortunately do. But the best thing is that India has withstood those pressures and with a smiling face. We are the only country in the world today which has good relations both with Russia and the Americans. Let me tell you, Shivani, what is the fundamental difference in India's foreign policy today? We have said it very clearly. We will no more bend backward for the sake of appeasing
anybody else.
Okay,
Today,
okay.
Bangladesh finance minister said we will no more be succumb to the Chinese. The Sri Lankans have put an embargo on the Chinese research vessels coming. Nepal signed a 10,000 megawatt hydropower deal with India. So what are people saying that we have lost the neighborhood?
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Pathikrit, out of time, I do thank all of our guests for joining us. It's evening. The evening is setting in. There's supposed to be a short road show, a Shobha Yatra of sorts that the two world leaders will be holding in just a bit from now. So let me take a break and we'll come right back after that. On the other side, we also get you the big political story of the day. The Congress TMC war of words only intensifying today, a day after Mamata Banerjee snapped ties for the Lok Sabha polls in the state.